Even though Darwin went on this global circumnavigation voyage, he doesn't start with the exotic. He doesn't start with the Galapagos. He starts with the farm, because those are things that are familiar with people. The birds as you see there, those are called fancy pigeons. Fancy pigeons are basically produced by breeders who take like your basic sky rat that I have a picture of there too, and selectively breed certain individuals to get the traits that they want. Similarly, all the different kinds of dogs are all ultimately related to gray wolves. So although domesticated dogs are all one species, and some of those can actually hybridize back with gray wolves, but not all of them can. So what Darwin says, okay, you know how living things are variable. Like within a single species, we can produce individuals that look really different from one another because we choose particular individuals that we're going to have interbreed. This kind of selection where like a farmer or a breeder chooses the individuals they're going to breed, he called this artificial selection. Okay, so the take home here is that living things within a species are variable, and you can get particular traits that you want through selective breeding. Well, the last picture was dogs, this one will be cats. Then Darwin says, when you look at wild animals, not within a single species, but when you look within genera or families, higher taxonomic levels, you see that there's also a fair amount of variation. I mean, there are all these things are cats, clearly from the look of them. And we get that because of like the shape of their head, but they get different ears, they have different body proportions. Some of them have saber teeth. Saber-toothiness actually evolved a bunch of times, as it turns out. So basically what Darwin says is that amount of variation that we see within living things, we see a similar range of variation when we look at wild animals as well. I made this penguins because when I look at these, I see a lot of animals that look really similar to one another. Animals that look really similar, we can assume are going to have very similar requirements for survival. So this is where Darwin kind of unveils the argument that he got from Malthus, which is living things are going to be able to breed a lot faster than the environment will be able to support them. So not everybody who's born is going to be able to live to adulthood. Not everyone who lives to adulthood is going to be able to breed. So he kind of, in this chapter, he really talks about like the economic lives of animals and how that's going to affect reproductive success. So then finally, he drops the knowledge bomb in this chapter about natural selection. And there are going to be actual words for notes coming on the next slide, but I want to kind of give the gist of it first, which is that living things are variable, but what decides who's going to survive depends on what's happening in the environment. So those like blonde colored mice, the lighter colored mice, they're cryptic when they're on dark rocks, but you can see they're cryptic when they're on light rocks, but you can see them on the dark rocks. Similarly, the black ones, you can't see them on the basalt, but they're very clearly seen on the lighter rocks. When they're hunted by predators out in this desert environment, the ones that are kind of intermediate in color are going to be at a disadvantage, so it's more important to be like all the way blonde or all the way dark, because the in-betweeners are going to get picked off no matter what kind of sand they're on. So this is the main overview of how natural selection works. First of all, we observe that individuals within a population are variable. And we know that at least some of that variation is inheritable because of what we see through directed breeding. Malthus tells us that there are limited resources in any environment, so not every individual who's born is going to be able to survive. So we say offspring have differential survival as well as reproductive success. Now, it's not merely survival, but reproductive success we're going to see is the main criterion here. So what Darwin proposed from these 4 facts is that the survival and reproduction of individuals isn't random. Instead, it's tied to the variation among individuals, meaning the environment chooses which individuals fit best in their environment. So individuals are born and there's some variation within a population. Nature is going to choose which of those variants are the ones that are going to be successful, because of the vagaries of the environment that they're in. Now, but nature doesn't cause the variation. So basically, in contrast to what Lamarck would say, you get whatever you get when you're born, but you can't change it over your lifetime noticeably. So nature only selects what the variation is like there. So like the dice are rolled and then individuals are variable, but nature doesn't actually make that variation happen. Those individuals who can survive well, we say they fit in better, right? So those individuals that are fit leave more offspring in the next generation. So what we call fitness, don't hear that as like individual physical fitness. What we mean is how well fit they are to their environment. Fitness, then, we measure in terms of reproductive success. I'm often going to use fitness and reproductive success interchangeably because that's what we're talking about here. And over time, I say that the population has a higher proportion of like fit individuals because like history is written by the winners. So it's the ones who survive, whether due to good genes or good luck, whichever ones are present in populations, that survive to adulthood, they're the ones that are going to be able to leave behind more offspring. And then Darwin would also assume that change in most characteristics is very gradual. This is an idea that we're going to see has been modified pretty extensively after Darwin's work, but this is where he was on it. So this is like the main intellectual argument of the origin of species. I'm just going to really quickly run through what the rest of the book is about. Basically, this is showing what the primary contrast would be between what Lamarck said and what Darwin said. Lamarck's theory, I showed you this picture before, this is basically the idea that if you leave the older an environment is, you get more diverse species because they have different amounts of time to kind of squeeze themselves into the environment. So you end up with the great chain of being. I put that piece of like sage-grass up there because it's what I think of. Like if I don't mow my lawn for a while, I start getting like these really long stalks of stuff. It looks really different than like what regular grass looks like. Now, so Lamarck's idea is sort of the leave it alone and things get more complicated model. But Darwin saw not this ladder-like set of relationships like the Scalonaturi, but also saw more like what Linnaeus saw with this bushy-like set of relationships among living things.